Polly, album-wise, the Her album. If you take the way that album was made and what you did in the studio with it, which is basically you played most of the instruments this time around, except for maybe the percussion and stuff. You used to have a collection of songs together and say, this is going to be my next album. Now I'm going to really pick and take a long time picking the producer. You produced this album yourself, why?
It's something I'd always wanted to do. I'd always envisaged doing that at some point when I felt ready. And it was the first time that I felt that the songs weren't lacking in an awful lot. You know, because often I write songs and demo them at home and I feel I can hear how they will grow and become in the studio, and that it seems there's got to be quite a lot of shaping done with them. But these, I didn't feel like that. They were making me feel something as they were. And I was loath to interrupt that too much. And I sort of just asked myself if I felt, well, maybe this should be the record that I do that. And it just felt like the right time, really.
Did you get to like the studio at all, or do you still absolutely hate it?
I don't enjoy being in the studio at all. I think I've got worse at it as I've got older. I find it less and less comfortable, and I've become somebody that finds it much easier to access the emotion I want to try and put into a song when I'm at home, comfortable in my own surroundings, and less able to do it in a studio, or it involves so much more effort of mind to get to that place. And I also think that when I've written a song and I demo it at home, to then try and recreate something of that moment again later on down the line feels so fake to me and so not right. And of course you have to sort of let go of it and let it become something else, which I find quite difficult to do, because I don't think you can't replicate something. And I know that when I've written a song, it's very fresh in my mind. It's like it's written because it's part of my everyday at that time, and you can never be more in touch with that song than that moment of writing for the way that it is at that time. And I think if you're going to re-record it, it has to become something else. You can't try and make it be that again.
Well then, there is a solution to that, which is something that you don't do and some bands do, and I think it's a very risky thing to do, but maybe you could take the risk, which is don't have songs together before you go to the studio. Come into the studio and try and do it from scratch there, because that little piece you're talking about at home that happens spontaneously and that you don't capture at home because you're bringing it into the studio and recreate it, and therefore it's not the same thing. Why don't you make it spontaneous and just let it happen in the studio? And see how, or is that a very expensive way to live your life?
No, it's not. In fact, again, that's something that I would like to try at some point. And, you know, for instance, people like Bob Dylan talk about that, and how he'll go into a studio and he might try something with one set of players, and he doesn't like that, he'll try it with another set of players, he'll try it totally different tempo, put it into 3 and it was in 4 or whatever. And I haven't really gone that route yet, and I still think I feel like I've got a long way ahead of me to try that stuff, and it's definitely one of the things I would like to try at some point.
Okay, but when I said earlier then about like the producer business of being so meticulous as to trying to pick the exact producer for a sound that you might have in your head for this collection of songs, i.e. I want my next album to sound a certain way, would it be the same thing with musicians? Because I do know like that, you know, the bunch of musicians that you always have are never permanent. They'll know that before they come in to work with you. Would you ever think though in those terms, saying this bunch of songs needs that kind of bass playing that I heard there, or that kind of guitar that I heard there, so I'll ring up these guys and bring them in?
Yeah, I always choose who I'm working with according to the songs. That's always the bottom line. You just listen to what they need or what they don't need, really. If, like now, I'm getting my head around working towards a new album, and I hear the collection of songs that I have, and I think, what do I need to stop them becoming too much like this? Because they could very easily go that route, and I don't want them to. So that's, you know, that I can do it in that way as well, of using people to know where I don't want it to go, and I know that using those people will help me not take it there.
Okay, I was going to ask, are you a perfectionist? But I'm going to ask myself, and I'll answer it myself. Are you a perfectionist? Yes, she is. Is perfectionism a good thing or a bad thing? Is it a plus or a hindrance?
I think it's served me well more than it's done me harm. I do think it can be detrimental in it can be limiting. So, for instance, like what you were saying about why not be freer in the studio and try it like that, or take half-written songs in, and that's the perfectionist part of me that finds that quite terrifying, you know, because because also I have a very clear idea of how I want things to be.
Yeah.
And I have a very clear idea of what I'm trying to do with this song. And I feel that if I can't see that through to its as far as I can take it myself, while I know that the essence of what I want is very strong, before it gets diluted with other people being around, I just don't think I'm going to get there. And I do think it's worked better for me than not being that way. And I also think that it helps me do good work. I mean, I think I could be much more throwaway if I wasn't so perfectionist about things, i.e. like you might see a song halfway through and you know it's not quite there yet, but think, oh, well, I'll do it later when we're there. And maybe that song would never reach its full potential because of that.
Okay, just one, I don't know why I'm sticking on producers all the way, but the Steve Albini one for the second album, did you want to get something out of your system at that time? Like make something very abrasive, make something very hard? You wanted the live sound as well, and was it that Steve Albini is the best guy for a live in the studio type thing?
It was many things going on at that time. I know that when I look back at it very fondly now, but I mean, when I first started out, the very first album I made, I radically wanted to do nothing of what was expected of me. So in the studio, for instance, I wouldn't allow our engineer head at the time, I wouldn't allow him to put any effects on anything. Everything was completely dry. We played it all live, apart from about 2 overdubs. And still, when I came to make my second record with Steve, I knew I wanted to do the same thing. I wanted it to be very live. I also had just signed with a major label for the first time. I just signed with Island. And it was almost like I wanted them to know that they can never tell me what to do, basically. And so I almost wanted to make a very difficult record, almost testing the ground with my relationship with them, and say, this is what I'm doing, and knowing that it was completely uncommercial. You know, I mean, in their terms, it was, and that's why I chose Steve, because he does that very well. He records a band as you sound, and it's not particularly radio friendly. You know, it sounds like a band in a room with all of its mistakes and dissonance and everything. And so that's why I chose to work with him, because I knew he wouldn't let me down, and just we would sound as we sounded.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And when you have new songs, when you have them together, when you think these might be the songs I might use in the next album, but you haven't recorded them yet, or else you haven't got them together as an album yet, do you put them in front of an audience and test them? And do you ever get shocked and say, oh gosh, maybe I'm wrong, maybe they don't seem to like that?
Again, that's something I started doing lately in the last maybe 4 years or so. And I do think I will like try out all these things eventually. But yeah, I've only just been able to have the confidence to start doing that, to sort of test a song a little before I record it. And before Her, I was playing, I don't know if I can say it, Who the Puck. I was playing that live, and I was playing a couple of other songs, just trying that out. And for instance, now I'm already playing a few of the songs, and I'll be playing them tonight for the next record.
Right.
And you do get a gauge as to, it's really nice to hear what people say about them. You know, I always really like to hear people that haven't heard those songs, do they stand up when you haven't heard them before? And that's quite a good test of a song, I think.
How do you think that people see PJ Harvey now, 7 or 8 or 9 albums down the line, as opposed to, say, the mid-1990s? When, for instance, like a lot of people, they had to focus on the fact that you came from the countryside, which is not your average art school rock band, you know what I mean, from the centre of London or New York or LA or whatever. And also the fact that you were mysterious, and you wouldn't talk about your lyrics, so we could only assume that you were what. And they come up with some terrible things about you, like this mad, loony witch kind of thing. I mean, what is it now? What is it in terms of 7 or 8 albums down the line? Has it mellowed out a bit, do you think?
I'd like to think so. The more sort of cynical part of me thinks probably it hasn't changed much, because I think it's very difficult for people to let go of an idea of you.
Yeah.
I find still now that most of the interviews that I do, people have an idea of me that they bring, and they fit me into that, and it's usually exactly what you described: strange girl living in the country. Usually they add on kind of man-hating, axe-wielding, you know, sort of angry, can't speak, very shy, reclusive, strange person. And that's kind of stuck. I don't actually think I've shaken that. And I think it's very difficult for people to allow change, really. But I don't know, that's just my supposition. I might be wrong. I'd like to think I'm wrong. And I know that it seems that a lot of people that come to my shows and come again and again and buy the records are quite open-minded and are willing to take those steps with me and see wherever I'm going next and get used to the fact that to allow change, you know. But I do think it's quite a hard thing to do for people that maybe started off with you back then and still think that's how you are. And I think those kind of ideas that people have about you stick fast. It's difficult to shake.
Have you shaken the shyness as you've grown older? I mean, you said yourself years ago, even for the first few albums, it did happen very quickly for PJ Harvey and compared to a lot of acts, that you were shy all the time, and that's really what a lot of people were mistaking for other things. And that now that you've been in charge of your own destiny right across the world so often and being in charge of tours and all that implies, is that, yeah, it's a fucking joke. PJ, the early days, I mean, I know you've gone through it a lot before, but like since we were just talking about that there a minute ago, there was good music in your house from what you once called hippie parents. I mean, there was like the Stones and maybe the Doors and Captain Beefheart and a bunch of others and whatever. Those kind of albums that you listened to are albums that were kind of maybe just there. There were ambient sounds to you in the background that they were playing. When you revisited those albums saying, now I want to hear these and get from these musicians, you know, my own thing, did you find a completely different thing? Do you find you had remembered it from what your parents had been playing, first of all?
Yeah, definitely. It always astonishes me, even now, if I still root around their vinyl collection. And I might pull out a record, think, I haven't heard that. And I put it on and I know every word to it because I played it on rotation when I was like 1.5 or something.
Yeah, exactly, yeah.
Yeah, so I did have to sort of go back and rediscover it for myself, because when you're a kid and your parents are playing Beefheart or something, my memories of it were feeling a bit ill at dinner times, and I really wanted to take it off. Or would be memories of driving around Cornwall, going on holiday, and mum and dad playing Beefheart, and I was feeling really car sick, you know. So yeah, I had to kind of go back, and it's only now I realise what a fantastic record collection they have.
And also, besides that, like when they weren't around, did you listen to the music of the day, the teen music of the day?
I did, yeah.
All the radio stuff.
Yeah, when I was, I think I started doing that when I was about 13. I can remember sort of rebelling and going to buy Duran Duran records. And
what a rebel you were!
What are you playing? I'd have my first record player in my bedroom, and I played Duran Duran and Soft Cell and things like that. Yeah.
But it was important to do that.
Oh yes, yeah.
Okay, so therefore I have to say, do you realise how important it is for people who like PJ Harvey, who want also to know more about who she is and find out more? They read a magazine, oh, an interview with PJ Harvey, I'll read that. Is it okay with you, the interview process of giving away a few things about yourself? Do you understand that thing of if you love somebody or really think somebody's great, you want their poster on the wall and you want to know about them?
Yes, I do understand that, because I know how I pounce on reading anything that I see of people that I'm really interested in. An interview, any interview I can find, really interested. But it's a strange one with me, because I also know that, particularly in text-written interviews, the way that you read it can be absolutely nothing like how it was said. So I mean, I know that. So when I read that, I know that I'm basically reading somebody's idea of this person and not actually who they are at all. Yeah. And it's a very difficult thing. I find interviews always disappointing for myself. Yeah. I feel I come out of them feeling like I've let myself down. I didn't say that, or knowing, or almost 99% of the time reading back over things and thinking, God, I didn't mean it like that. It didn't sound like that. And it's a very, very painful, horrible process. But I understand it's an important thing to do. I mean, even from the point of view of even letting people know that you've made a record or whatever, to know you're still breathing.
Yeah,
it's
exactly,
it's important. Yeah, so I don't see it as the enemy to be fought off and shouldn't have to be there anyway. It's a necessary thing, and just try and distance myself from it a bit, really.
And what about the idea of, like, I mean, I know you write poetry, I know you read poets, I know you read lots of books, and I know you are interested in all kinds of the visual arts, etc. In fact, more particularly the visual arts maybe than anything else. When you write a song, when you write something down on a piece of paper, and I call it page poetry, whatever, can that become a song? Can it be a song later because you put music to it, or is always poetry and song a song?
It's all mixed up together, you know. 2 words might spark off a whole song. And they all, I haven't written poetry for a while. I went through a phase of writing it a lot, and it helped my lyric writing at the time enormously. And I would lift whole poems and put them straight into song. And then it's just, as a songwriter, things change all the time, and you keep finding different ways in to find a song. And I'm right now, I'm not with poetry at all. It's much more coming from the music first, and words shaping and forming, and then research, and then I'll go to books, or I'll go to the library and I'll look up something to do with these two words that somehow came out of this song, and you can make a song in that way. So it changes all the time. And at the moment, it's definitely not around poetry. It's much more about shapes of words, which then lead into stories. And hard to explain, but they come in all different ways, constantly. And it's like this slow metamorphosis. I mean, I've been writing for 12, 14 years now or something, and I just see how all that time it's changing and shifting all the time. And I never really go back to some way I've written before.
Right, yeah, okay. But do you have time for all the other things? I mentioned the visual arts. I mean, you went to university. I don't know if you took it to full 3 or 4 year term or whatever, but the pottery and all that kind of stuff. Do you have time to do all that? Because you often talked about how important it is to the use of the hands. It's not just a painting, or it's not just a piece of whatever. It's just the whole idea of the physicality of it. Do you have time for that? Or is it
I don't have time. I could make time if I wanted to.
Yeah.
But I found that as long as, like what I'm doing at the moment musically is fulfilling that need. If I feel that I'm not being fulfilled and I don't have enough tactile, but I don't, I like to play real instruments. I'm not very good with playing synthesizers and stuff like that. So I'm very hands-on with instruments. And I need that. So that quality comes from that. And I get my sort of input visually. I go to a lot of exhibitions. I go and I feel like that feeds me so much information, which I express through music and singing and words, and it all feeds the same place, really.
Okay, but hold on. You're on tour. You don't have an awful lot of time in each place you go to, but you'd love to be more of a tourist there when you can. If you have 5 gigs a week, it's very hard to do this kind of thing. But you say you go to exhibitions, etc. I presume like you go to the Metropolitan Museums and places and stuff like that. But do you go to the kind of more cafe, cooler, underground stuff too?
Yeah. I always I get a what's on immediately. If I know I've got a day off somewhere, or even for instance at the moment I've been at home in Dorset for a long time. I go up to London at least every other week, and I'll get a what's on. I'll look, I'll scour through, I'll find it, and I target things that I know will interest me. And yeah, I go to all those back little streets, cafes, and you get to know countries after a while. When you've toured for a long time, you know where those streets are. For instance, in Paris or wherever, where it's a good place to walk, to duck into little art galleries.
Do you feel you'd be failing yourself if you didn't push yourself? I get the impression you push yourself all the time. And it's the pushing, it's the kind of realisation that you're never really great at whatever it is you do. You never achieve greatness, but the journey is what it's all about. If you didn't do that to yourself, would you feel as though you've failed yourself? Be more than just disappointed, just a failure. Just remember, most of the population don't want to push themselves at all.
I push myself all the time, much more than I have to. And sometimes that cannot be a good thing. I think you have to have a bit. I try and keep a bit of perspective on that, and not because I think I can push myself too much into one way of writing maybe, and you lose perspective, or you don't realise that, gosh, I've written the same song 3 times over in the last month. Like to do something else. But I work really, really hard at what I do. And it is because I want everything I do to be the best thing I've ever done. And you can't even begin to find that movement. And I don't think I've ever done the best thing I've ever done. But having that as the goal really does make you stretch yourself all the time. And I feel that's how it should be. I would never want to do something that I knew I hadn't tried my absolute 100% best to make it as good as it could possibly be, and stretch myself and my potential to its maximum every time. And if I didn't do that, I wouldn't want to do music anymore. I wouldn't want to do anything, present things to people anymore, unless I know that's as good as I could make it at that time in my life. I'm not saying it's brilliant, but that's as good as it could be. And then I'm not satisfied until it's like that.
Do you like fame?
That's a really difficult question. I mean, I'm not one of those people that goes around feeling poor me because I don't have quite as much quietness and obscurity as I want to. And I mean, I live a very quiet life, and I think that it's how you conduct yourself. I don't actually think of myself as particularly famous, you know, at all. I mean, certainly not if you measure yourself against Madonna or somebody, you know.
Right.
I just go about my daily business, whatever city I'm in. I hardly ever get noticed, and I think it's the way you conduct yourself as well. I mean, I do a lot of stuff on my own, and I don't go around looking.
But I mean, if the next album was to sell 10 or 15 million copies, and you were up there at the top of the charts battling away with Christina Aguilera, could you take it?
I mean, it seems
And all that implies.
laughable to me at the moment, but yeah, if I was to go down that route and imagine it, phew, I think I would find it really uncomfortable. I don't think I could take it. So,
Okay, how about this one then? I mean, which is something you always eschew. You don't go.
But I'd be game, you know. Like I'd be.
Yeah.
Part of me would be.
Try it.
Part of me would be delighted
Yeah.
that so many people like this precious thing that I meant so much to me. So there's part of me that really wants that. There's part of me that thinks I really want a lot of people to really enjoy this. You know.
Hold on, you
So
definitely
I would never want.
you definitely want a lot of people to hear your
Yeah.
albums. Like, for instance, if 1 million hears or 6 million, you'd love the 6 million heard.
Yeah.
No question.
Yeah.
Okay, and all that might imply and the baggage that might bring it on and see what happens.
Yeah.
Okay, now, what about, say, you did music for a movie or something and you got an Oscar nomination or something, and that implies the red carpet and all that implies as well. I mean, I know that you have this trepidation, I know, about the studio, you can't stand it. Okay. You have a bit of trepidation maybe about going out live. You don't like the idea of it, and once you're out live, you absolutely love it.
Yeah.
Okay, now the trepidation you'd have for the red carpet, would you kill yourself before you'd walk down that carpet, would you?
Probably wouldn't go actually.
But you're nominated for an Oscar. It's called Rude. I mean, I know for a fact that you were brought up extremely well and mannered.
I
You mentioned
was,
it earlier
yeah,
on.
yeah.
That'd be rude.
It would actually, wouldn't it? Yes, yeah. No, I feel really bad. Yes, it would. No, I'd go.
And enjoy it. The thing about the studio, by the way, that you don't like, I know that like you bring in sort of fragrances and do things. That's one thing. It makes the studio feel better or make it smell better. Whatever. Does it? I mean, I know this. Well, whatever. I don't know what the. Gosh, I'm a bloke. I don't
fragrances
know. Whatever. You make it smell different than some.
Like
okay, let's put it this way then.
Thing.
Some smelly rock and roll band have just been used in the studio for the last few weeks. So you bring in something to make it smell better. Okay.
Well, I've got a new solution. I
really?
don't go to studios anymore. So I just know I'm never going back to one again.
Really, that is a solution.
Ever.
No, I was
That's
just
the
wondering if, I was like, if actually what you do, that's some nebulously different thing that the air smells different, can actually make the music sound different as well.
I try and in the past when I've worked in really sterile studios, I might just take one or two things that make me smile. You know, whether it's some little ornament or something. But no, I don't. I might have in the past taken fragrances and stuff and then gave up on that and thought that's a bit hippie nonsense really. No, I don't do that, and I think now I just don't ever want to go back into those sterile studio situations because I feel so uncreative in them.
Okay, if it's all so important, if your work is really that important, could I say in any way, like, are your ambitions, are they confined to a kind of an artistic achievement, or have you other ambitions in your life?
Ooh, that's going quite deep, isn't it?
It's going without having to be specific if you don't want to, but you can be general.
No, I mean, I think I try and keep a perspective on not my work being my entire life, and it's really hard to even say work. It doesn't feel like work. It feels like life. I wouldn't want to say my music and my songwriting is my work. It does not. It's me. That's me. That's who I am. That's the way I live. But I am always aware that there are a lot of other very important things in life to give one perspective on that thing that's really important to you. And I try a lot, and I'm still trying to do all of those other things that, yes, I do have other things I think I'd really like to do that, or I really like to overcome this problem with myself before I'm 80, or I'd really like to do that before the next 10 years. Yeah, I have all these goals that are much
But
more...
you have done stuff like drum lessons and flamenco and that. Is that because you can, and also because you're not good at it, so therefore this is something I can test myself with?
I think I've always gone to different things like that at different times in my life for what I needed right then. I mean, I can remember when I loved learning flamenco, and I learned it for about 3 years, and at that time it really helped me as a person. It helped me stand up straight. It helped me physically feel a lot better, you know, and I needed that at that time. And even to this day on stage, I find myself moving in a way that came from that, particularly when I haven't got a guitar around me or something. But and it all, yeah, I just go to those things as and when I need them. I'm learning piano right now. I'm trying to learn how to read music and learn the bass clef, which I've never learned, and that for some reason that's really resonating in me. I want to do that at the moment. It's like going back to school, and ever so frustrating because I have to play so slowly because I've never learnt bass clef, I've never learnt piano, I've never really played the piano until this last year.
So how do you write? I mean, do you write on an acoustic guitar? Do you write? I thought you wrote on the piano at home.
No, I write by ear, and up until the last year and a half I wrote on guitar, and just vocally. But
and no matter how many collaborations you might have done down through the years, you write yourself.
Yeah, collaborations can be good. They bring in they can bring a lot of ideas that I can use then. But I always see it as something I do other than just for a short time, other than my own thing. I mean, it's always I really have this drive to want to do a very I'm trying to think of the right word, that a very concentrated piece of work that is mine.
Yeah.
I like to feel very focused, and I feel slightly out of focus when you're working with somebody else, but that can be a good thing.
Right, yeah. Okay, but look, finally, just at the beginning of this century, the Stories in the City, Stories in the Sea album, you had Thom Yorke. Now, the idea of getting somebody like Thom Yorke from Radiohead, did it have to be him? Like, so like you didn't, had you known him beforehand?
No.
It was a call and response kind of song.
Yeah.
And you needed this. Why Thom Yorke? And don't just say because he's got a good voice, I know that.
Yeah, well, that was obviously, but that, you know, you can't dismiss that. I think he had a beautiful voice that felt like it opened me up, that I really felt so much. And there's not many voices that do that for me. So it was that, but it was also, I like hearing him sing, but I really wanted to hear him sing something very, very emotional, personally, humanly emotional, because I think Thom, with a lot of his lyrics, he wants to express more kind of things outside of oneself a lot of the time, although I think that comes through anyway. But I wanted to hear him sing a very moving love song, really. Yeah. I really wanted to hear that incredible voice do that. And I very much didn't want to be the only singer on my record, because I found it a bit dull, actually, just to have my voice all the way through. I think it's really nice to have somebody else singing.
Okay, PJ, thanks a million for talking to us. It's been a pleasure as usual.
Thank you.